Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good day and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. I'm Heather Hayes, pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Cedar Rapids, and your moderator for today's discussion. Today we will be exploring one of the issues that has risen to the forefront of our national discussion. DACA, the abbreviation for an Obama administration-era program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was a frequent talking point for candidate Trump on the campaign trail. He vowed he would dismantle the program, but once in office seemed to soften his position. However, on July 10th, 10 state attorneys general, led by Ken Paxton of Texas, wrote a letter to the Department of Justice threatening to sue to dismantle the program if President Trump didn't stop issuing new permits by September 5th. The Trump administration has acquiesced and is no longer accepting applications, either new or renewal. In a further twist, however, it has come up in news again as the government is moving towards a budgetary shutdown on December 8th. The legislature needs to pass a spending bill to avert shutdown, and a coalition of liberal Democrats are insisting that the DREAM Act be attached to the spending package. So we have three branches of government in a tangle with a group of youth and young adults brought into this country as children sitting squarely in the middle. To help me untangle this issue, I have with me on today's panel Laura Kamienski, co-chair of the Lynn County Republican Party. Welcome. Nilvia Brownson, a DACA recipient. Welcome, Nilvia.
Thank you.
And Lisa Munoz, Associate Professor of Sociology at Hawkeye Community College. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Each of you bring different interests, expertise, and perspective to this question, and thank you for being with us today. Well, why don't we jump in first by exploring what DACA is and what it isn't. Would you like to jump in with that a little bit? What are the parameters of this program?
Sure. So prior to President Obama initiating deferred action for childhood arrivals, we knew that there were about 65,000 kids who were graduating from American high schools every year out of status. So because of a Supreme Court decision back in the 1980s, kids are allowed, regardless of their immigration status, to attend public schools, K through 12. But then they'd kind of hit a brick wall. And so, not being able to legally work or go on to college necessarily or any of those kinds of things, military, whatever it might be. So DACA is essentially a deferral from deportation. It gave a temporary work status in the state of Iowa, along with other states, that allowed an opportunity for things like driver's licenses. It still didn't put people on a path to citizenship, and I think that's probably one of the biggest misnomers is, for example, why don't people just apply for citizenship? Because they're in a temporary status, and those the deferral from deportation is only granted for 2 years at a time. It doesn't give them a legal permanent residency, doesn't give them a path to citizenship. So it has provided some opportunities for people to work in the regular economy, to get driver's licenses and things of that nature, but it hasn't been a full onward path to full integration.
Well, what are the limitations on the program? Are there people that are not covered? I think there's some different...
Yeah, so I think that they have to be, isn't it 15 before they can apply, right. Or have entered before they were 15, right. And they have to be under 31. So it's for people who were brought to the United States as children, and if they're past that age, they automatically don't qualify. But they also have to go through a similar background check that anybody applying for residency or anything else would have to. So there have been people who clearly have not qualified based on, maybe a criminal background or something of that nature. But people who have DACA have gone through the, quote unquote vetting process.
Okay.
I think something important to note about DACA is that it's not a law that Congress passed.
Right.
It was instituted through an executive order. And that's where a lot of the conservative or Republican resistance to it comes from, is that it's very clear, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress shall make a uniform law of naturalization. It's Congress's job to make our immigration laws. And the fact that this was yet another area where President Obama decided that he was going to make policy and make law through executive orders, even if we thought it was a good policy to have, which is another debate, that was not the way to do it. And that's one of the biggest problems. And, when President Trump suspended the granting of these orders, he said, okay, 6 months, Congress address this. This is your job.
And I think, we understand that too. And I think the important thing to remember is this is not a new issue. Going back to, the McCain-Kennedy bill, going back to 2001, I think the DREAM Act has been introduced to Congress on a bipartisan effort, or through bipartisan effort, several times. And so this is something that, people have been waiting for. But at the same time, recognizing that this isn't just an abstract issue. This is people's lives being played, political football with. And so, yeah, we understand that, but I think that, there are lots of issues that, yeah.
Well, and speaking of the personal aspect of this, Nilvia, you have actually benefited from being a DACA recipient.
Right.
Could you share a little bit about your own story, your successes, and also and the things that you are worried about right now or fear?
Right, sure. So, excuse me, I came to the country when I was 14 months old, so just over a year old. My mom brought my sister and I here because she was escaping domestic violence. And so the United States is all I know. I have no other home. Culturally, I belong to both cultures, of course, but physically, this is all I've ever known. And I qualified for DACA when it came out in 2012. I was 19 years old. Excuse me. And it allowed me to get a driver's license. It allowed me to stay in school. At that time, I was considering pulling out of school because I couldn't afford it. Working minimum wage jobs that, I was working like 80 hours a week, and it was just becoming too much. And so DACA allowed me to apply for jobs that I was qualified for, like my first job that I got with DACA was as a direct support staff for a program that helped people with special needs, and it was something that paid me well and that I enjoyed doing. And currently I work for a mortgage servicing company, and I have slowly climbed up the ladder, and I'm compensated very well for the job that I do, and I've been successful in that, and it's something that I can be proud of, that I'm building a career rather than just working, like I said, dead-end jobs that I personally feel that I am overqualified for. And just in general, DACA opens up a lot of doors for I don't know what the number is, around 800,000 people.
Yeah,
that,
going on 1 million.
right, that qualify for this. And it's allowed us to have peace, at least for 2-year increments, but it's not, of course, it's not perfect. It's not without its faults. We always describe it as a sort of Band-Aid over a gushing wound. It's not a permanent fix by any means. And my biggest critique, of course, is that it doesn't include everyone. Of the 11 million people here, it includes a fraction. And I just think I've been here then for 23 years, and I'm considered by the majority of people in the U.S., they support dreamers, quote unquote dreamers, and I consider myself an American. And if my mother has been here the exact same amount of time and has contributed equally as I have, I don't understand why she's not seen in the same light as I am.
Because she broke the law to come here.
And
we have methods set up, and
they're not. There
that's
aren't
very
the biggest
limited
problem.
people qualify
so
for.
Exactly. There are people waiting years and years to come here. They're following the rules. Why, we've done amnesties in the past, and said, okay, this is the last time, and it gets brought up again.
Well, that's because we're not realistically looking at the needs of the global economy. I mean, just to take Nilvia's family, or many immigrant families, for example, they're part of mixed status families. So what that means is that some people might be U.S. citizens, some people might be temporary DACA or other visa recipients, and some people are undocumented. In many cases, there's no legal way for their own family members to sponsor or apply to adjust their status.
And that's one of the things a lot of people are worried about with DACA and the DREAM Act, is that, okay, if we do give you, I'm very sympathetic to the fact that living in America is the only life you've ever known. I can understand, we should probably come up with a way to address that. But how do we make sure that then, we always hear about anchor babies or things like that.
That is a totally unrealistic term. Who is going to cross a border
I'm just saying
and wait
that's
21 years in addition to
now.
10 years? I mean, using terms like that is what holds us back from progress. I mean, there's that's not a substantiated claim. That somebody would cross over into this country, wait 21 years to be able to apply through their quote unquote anchor baby, and then wait an additional 10-year waiting period. That's the problem, is that the system is broken. There's not a feasible way for people that are in dire need of coming here to do so easily and quickly. And so if, I fully support my mother's decision to come here to the US when I was a baby. She felt that that was the only way that she could support us and build a better future for us. And there wasn't a way for her to do so without waiting a tremendous amount of time, at which point she may have
and there are thousands of people now in similar situations who are waiting.
But
who are following the rules.
But I think
why should we give you and your family a preference over those people? These are all the issues that we need to address and get a fuller, more comprehensive approach to this issue.
I agree with that.
That's what we agree
See,
with.
and I think that's the part of agreement that I've heard you say the system is broke, and you obviously are right there in agreement with that. So going back to what are the options for the Dreamers right now as they are in this kind of limbo waiting for Congress to act? Do they have options? Do they have options?
Well, do you want to?
I think that's Congress needs to act.
Congress needs to
act. And I don't think holding a budget bill hostage over this one issue, when I took legislative process in law school, one of the first lessons we learned was the single subject rule, that bills coming through Congress are supposed to address one subject. Obviously, I think we all recognize they don't do that now, but really, how are we supposed to get anything meaningful done if we're holding the budget for the entire government hostage over this one issue? How are we supposed to get a realistic, meaningful solution to this problem if we're being, our Social Security checks and defense spending and all of that is held hostage until we address this one issue the way Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer want us to?
Well, and we would love for some of the other Republicans, who could get on board with people like Senator McCain, who've supported this in the past. This is not a Democrat-only idea. I mean, like I said, this has been a bipartisan effort. For crying out loud, Senator Grassley supported the 86 bill, the one you referred to as the amnesty bill. Which, by the way, I'll just say, the idea of legalizing or regularizing those folks, my oldest brother-in-law was able to become a U.S. citizen because of the 86 bill. He is a business owner. He is a multiple home owner. These are, people contributing in terms of economics and social and cultural life. So what if the parents of the so-called, what you want to call anchor baby, regularizes? They're contributing to the U.S. economy. I mean, the services that we are using, the places where we go, the things that are being built. You know, it's easier. You say that people are waiting for years, thousands of people are waiting their turn. In reality, some people, it doesn't matter how long they wait. There is no path for them. So they could wait 20 years, they could wait an entire lifetime. When we have an immigration law that disqualifies people because they don't have the educational background or they don't have a connection to a U.S. citizen family member, but we encourage them to come and work maybe low-paid jobs, I mean, we're not being realistic about the American needs or the global needs. And I think that's what hopefully we could all agree on, is some need for a comprehensive immigration reform. I don't have faith that Congress is going to pass something in the next 6 months. Like I said, we've been waiting for this since, you know, the early 2000s. It's been on the table multiple times. Those of us in immigrant advocacy work have seen, you know, another generation of young people go to the wayside who have a lot of potential. And by the way, just to, you know, clarify, these are folks we've invested in too. So because of the K through 12 system that allows folks to, you know, go to public school regardless of status, we've invested in them. These are graduates of American high schools. Why on earth would we want to just send them away at this point? So
I think, you know, obviously, yes, we do need to figure out a way to address this issue. But I think the problem, at least from the conservative or Republican, whatever you want to call it, side that we're seeing, is that it's becoming very much an all or nothing grab, that we must make everyone legal across the board, period. And along with that, you know, with lawful permanent resident status, then you can bring in your family, and we're continuing to reward what, again, I'm sorry, but I have to keep coming back to what was originally an illegal act. You know, if my dad went and robbed a bank, but put all the proceeds into my 529 plan to pay for my college, oh, well, he's doing something good with it, so we'll let it go. We'd never do that.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to get into the act of legality. Slavery was legal, you know, women not being able to vote was legal. I'm sure I probably...
And we went through the process to change that and make it right.
And that's all we're asking for on this as well. You know, and it doesn't even have to be necessarily the idea of regularizing all 11 million people. The idea of a lot of immigrants is that they don't have intentions necessarily of staying here forever. You know, it's easier to get a TV across the border than it is to get a person legally. So why is it that we can take goods that are made in other countries and consume them, but we don't give those same kinds of rights to human beings? A lot of people would like to maintain their ties in their home countries. We don't have a system that allows for that. George W. Bush had the idea of a guest worker program that would have allowed, you know, for people to just come in temporarily and head back. We've done that historically more than once. We had the Bracero program in the mid-20th century. So there've been models out there before where that's happened. It's not an all or nothing.
So Laura, what do you see if we've got this 6-month window to determine how to move forward? What do you think, or would you hope would happen in the legislative sphere to move this forward, aside from, as you said, being held hostage on December 8th?
Right. Well, I think, you know, obviously there is the consensus, and I don't think there would be anybody who would argue with you that we shouldn't have some sort of immigration reform. One of the things that would need to be addressed is, you know, I think there is fairly broad support across the board for, you know, people like, you know, a 14-month-old who was brought here. You did not have the mens rea, if you will, the legal term, to be breaking the law yourself. That I think there is broad support for addressing that somehow, but not giving the full rights of citizenship, the full, you know, once you're a citizen, then you can bring in more family and things. That, you know, we're not going to round you up and send you back to wherever your mother came from. That's a culture and things that you don't know. Maybe we need to address some sort of a program for, you maybe it's a choice that as you approach 18, you choose, okay, do you prepare to return home and come back legally? Or do you want to always have this kind of permanent limbo status of, we'll let you stay for now? Maybe that's one option. But it's something that needs to be decided by Congress with input from their constituents. That's how we make laws in the United States.
And I would hope that, as the Republican Party spouts off the idea of being a nation of laws, that they also are serious about their role as the party of family values. And, that in this situation, we're talking about family values, then the separation of families is contrary to that. And so whatever bill is on the table, whether that's a comprehensive bill or something that just impacts DACA recipients, or if it's a more enforcement-only bill, that we're really looking at the impact of separating families. Some of us lived through and were on the front lines of the Postville raid back in 2008. And we know the impact of family separation psychologically, educationally, in terms of need for social services, and the impact that has on communities too. So I just would hope that we look at this from a full kind of picture and not just narrow in on the idea of law and order.
I also want to comment just on, not giving DACA, this group, say if we stick strictly to Dreamers, not giving them full citizenship and rights to bring over their family, as you say. The majority of Dreamers, all of their family is already here. Like that fear of bringing over, thousands or millions of people over the border once we have citizenship, like my family is all here. For the majority of us, that's the situation. And I personally have no family left, in Mexico, but of the many people that I know, the few family members that they have left in whatever country they were originally from have no interest in coming here. Everybody who wants to be here currently as part of their family is already here. And additionally, the laws are very, very strict as to what family members are allowed. So that's spouses, that's parents and children, that's not even siblings are given full, equal access to that. So, that's a really, I would say,
Adult siblings
unsubstantiated.
are given a lower priority
Right.
status, so that the wait time is, depending the country you're from, 20 to 22
Exactly.
years from places like Philippines or Mexico or whatever. It might
So it's a very unsubstantiated claim that I feel like, and you continue to use the Republican Party. I'm not going to split this into a partisan argument. Whoever is against reform or a permanent pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, it's an unsubstantiated claim, and a lot of the arguments that are used against what we want are just fear-mongering. And it's not fair for you to make those claims when there's not enough support behind them.
It's not an unsubstantiated claim, though, because every time something like that, where limiting what kind of coattails or whatever, if you were, that the Dreamers can have, every time that's proposed, it's shouted down. It said, no, we can't have a second-class status, that they don't get everything a normal immigrant would get.
We shouldn't.
Nancy Pelosi is shouted down, all of us or none of us, when that it's an all or nothing, that we can't have that kind of limited.
To clarify, what I'm saying is the unsubstantiated claim is your claim that we would bring over tons of family members. That's what I'm claiming. I'm not.
I didn't say
as
that,
far
but-
as the partisanship, that again, I'm not going to say
I
that
think there
this
could
is
be
a
rights
strict
of
claim.
full citizenship and a path to citizenship without the ability to, to sponsor future. That needs to be addressed, but I think that can be a separate issue, right? It doesn't have to
Right.
be tied to rights of citizenship for people who are currently here.
Well, it's not full citizenship then, if we're starting to have levels
Well,
of,
no, they're already-
of how many of the rights you get.
No,
or
there are
not.
already limitations. You can't petition for a grandparent or grandchild. That's current. You can't petition for a cousin. So what I'm
Right.
saying, that's currently. So, I mean, that's something that could be addressed down the road. You know, do we want to limit who can petition for whom?
So one of the things that does sort of strike me in this conversation is the lack of agency in some ways for dreamers who came over because of decisions of parents or so not of your own. I think you said mens rea. She didn't have, she wasn't actively making
We can
a choice.
revisit Legally Blonde, mens rea and actus reus.
Oh, that's right.
The mindset of knowing you're doing something wrong and then the actual act.
And you have created a life and been creating, making your own decisions and creating your own pathway. However, you don't have a full control over, from 2 years to 2 years, which is how it used to be, and now wondering what will happen in the future. What are some of the, maybe very quickly, what impact does that have personally, or you brought up Postville, socially, in the social fabric of to be living from 2 year to 2 year, or with this inability to act on your own behalf?
Right. So I do agree. It's extremely frustrating that I have ways of acting. I have ways of community building and organizing and calling on people to call their legislators and whatnot. But I don't have that right to vote. I'm not anybody's constituent because I can't elect anybody into office. And so it is very frustrating that I'm not in control of what ultimately happens with my life. As far as what my fears are for the future, of course, there's always that fear that I'll be torn apart from my family. I have a 3-year-old daughter who's just amazing. And I'm married, I have a husband here, and I've built a life here, and it's not something that I can ever imagine leaving. And just having provisions put on my life, my entire life, is just not something that I think is right. I mean, the name of the show is Ethical Perspectives, and if we look at this solely from an ethical perspective, I think it's clear that there's something wrong here, and that we have to act sooner rather than later. Otherwise, my life and everyone else that's affected, of course, continues to just stay in limbo.
I think it's important. Are we out of time?
We heard.
You mentioned, so many things that the U.S. has one of the most lenient, broadest, most welcoming immigration policies. It's not perfect. We definitely need to tweak some of the details, but there's no other country in the world that just lets anybody come in that wants to.
Well, neither do we, but
to be
clear, neither do
in that
we.
direction make it.
But we are a nation of immigrants, so.
This has been a great conversation, and obviously we have barely begun to scratch the surface. It will be something that you, the viewers, can be watching in the coming months as the legislature will be making some decisions, most hopefully, and having the conversations that we hope that they will have to create a better future for the dreamers, and one in which that they can flourish alongside the rest of us. Nilvia, I'd like to especially thank you for joining us today. I know this is an interesting conversation for the three of us, but for you, it really is your future that we're talking about here. I'd like to thank you also, the viewers, for joining us today on Ethical Perspectives on the News, and see you next time.